The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
Hey, it's Kevin Lawton with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. And on today's episode, I am going to be joined by Alan Silberstein, who is the co-founder at ShipLab. And ShipLab is a 3PL fulfillment partner based out of San Diego. And we're going to talk to Alan a little bit about how ultimately ShipLab was founded, how it came to be, some of the challenges around fulfillment and e-commerce today, and what brands should be looking for when looking at a fulfillment partner. And we're also going to talk about their journey from 800 square feet to 175,000 square feet. No small feat, I'll say, there in just 6 years, and some of the learnings from that growth period and those moves as well. So, Alan, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. Thanks for that perfect introduction.
Perfect. Wow, I'll take that today. Thank you for that. So it's great to meet you here and great to get you on the show. So why don't we start off? Tell us a little bit about ShipLab itself, what it is that you guys really do and focus on, and also, a little bit of the founder story here. How did it kind of come to be?
Yeah, for sure. So like you mentioned, we're a 3PL. Our main focus is e-commerce, or at least that's how we began. We have two facilities today, one that still focuses pretty purely on e-commerce, the other one that's more the traditional pallet in, pallet out, full truckload type fulfillment. The services that we offer span pretty much anything that you might need. So whether it's inventory management, order fulfillment, Amazon replenishment, kitting services, barcoding, labeling, anything that you might need, we can do. And we really have done it all. And so the division of kind of labor or focus is divided between the two facilities so that we can really focus each one on what we do best at each one. And we did that because of how we got started. So I know that you wanted me to touch on that as well. And we started ShipLab out of a need for our own businesses. So it was myself and two partners that started it. It was in October of 2017. So we're coming up on exactly 7 years right now. And the need for it was based on us having products that we were selling online, shipping out of our own garages, our parents' garages. And we were growing and needed to outsource the fulfillment. And we got to the point where we couldn't do it anymore for ourselves. And so we started looking, and we're all San Diego guys. We all grew up in San Diego, which is why we're in San Diego now. Is just obviously the easiest way to begin where we were ourselves physically. And so when we wanted to outsource it, we were looking for a place that was local, accessible, so that we still felt like we had some sort of control over what was going on with our product, or not so much control, but at least access to it. That they had experience with e-commerce and knowing how to work with several different sales channels and integrations and high SKU counts and returns and order changes and things like that. And unfortunately, we found that most places knew really well how to work with pallets and not as well how to work with e-commerce, or they were missing just one or two of the things that we wanted to get checked off, and we just couldn't find a place that was perfect for us. So we decided to rent a little 800 square foot warehouse, like you mentioned. We hired one guy that had experience setting up warehouses previously to help us make sure that we weren't messing it up completely, and put our own products in there. And we created the service really for ourselves. The cool thing is as we've grown to where we are now, and we obviously now work with many different brands, we're still our own clients to this day, which is a cool kind of differentiator for us, where we're providing the service, but we're still receiving it as well. And so we know whether things are working well or if they're not. And whenever they might not be, then we know how to fix them and when we need to fix them, because our own brands are going to suffer along with our clients.
Very interesting there. And I think, it's interesting because congratulations on 7 years here. We're recording this in October, and it's 7 years for you. So, but I think it's interesting because you see, 7 years ago, 2017, right? I mean, e-commerce was there, right? But certainly like not to the extent and maybe the ubiquitous nature in consumers as it is now, right? I mean, certainly there's been huge penetration into the consumer market on e-commerce and ordering over the last 7 years, and just the comfort level too. I think of multiple different generations and demographics and things being comfortable ordering online and things like that. So it's very, I could see definitely 7 years ago where the challenge was that like, oh, there were not many fulfillment partners that were familiar with that type of level of fulfillment and being able to handle like piece pick and things like that, and very much so just focused on case or pallet quantities, right? So very interesting how that kind of came to be, and interesting that you guys are still your own clients as well, I think. So you end up in San Diego there, and I think when you think about like California fulfillment centers, I think a lot of times people mostly talk about like LA, right, or Inland Empire or something like that. And obviously, close to home, right, makes a lot of sense, right, for you for a perspective. But I'm curious from like a brand's perspective, what should a brand consider when they're thinking about location of their fulfillment partner? I mean, there's been a lot of discussion, I will say, and some discourse too, I think lately that I've seen on like LinkedIn, for example, where there was like this big push for, oh, if you're a brand, you should be diversifying your inventory distribution and you should be in multiple locations across the country and all this stuff. But what do you think from your perspective and from a brand perspective? What matters when you're looking for location for a fulfillment partner? I mean, does it really weigh that much as a factor, and what should they consider?
So the need for multiple locations across the country can become something that is beneficial at certain volumes. And so for the much bigger brands, that does make a lot more sense. For most brands, that doesn't really make too much sense. There's more hassle and headaches with managing multiple locations and multiple warehouses than there is with the benefits that come with it. Um, the majority of the brands that we work with have just a single location, and there are benefits to being in San Diego or California, and there's obviously some downsides to it. So the benefits, number one, we're incredibly close to the port in Long Beach, so we're just
Mm.
about an hour south of it. Most brands manufacture overseas, and so the product comes into that port. So the logistics for timing and cost of getting their inventory to our warehouse is a huge plus. Obviously, with us being in San Diego, the shipping zones are mostly like zone 8 or far. We're shipping cross country a lot of the time, and so you would think it takes longer, it costs more, so there's a big downside to it. What we found is that because of our volume and our rates and what like that we've negotiated with the carriers and the different options that we have, that's not that big of a deal. The difference is pretty marginal.
Mm.
We have the ability to do some automatic rate shopping within our system, and so that we connect all different carriers, all different options, and for each order it chops it out across all different carriers, and it will always select the best option, whether that's just cheapest or cheapest within a certain transit time. So if a brand is worried about being in San Diego and a product taking 7, 8, 9 days to get to say New York, we can make sure that we set up an automation in our system to tell it, hey, it cannot take more than 5 days to get there. Select the cheapest option to arrive within 5 days. And with that, we know that we're always shipping it the best way possible. And the price difference with the rates that we have and the options that we have available is very, very marginal. And so the thing that we found is that quality of service is way more important than the few cent difference that you might save on shipping by being somewhere else,
Mm.
because the lack of quality can lead to much bigger issues like lost inventory, unfulfilled orders, orders that are fulfilled incorrectly, things like that. And that unfortunately is something that is pretty prevalent in our industry. And so with us being in San Diego, being local, being here, and really having built a team that has been with us for the majority of the time that from when we started the company, we've been able to provide a really high quality service that includes examples like clients leaving our service in search of better pricing or multiple locations, things like that, only to come back to us realizing that, hey, the quality of service is really worthwhile. and the location, the downsides to the location don't really mean as much.
We'll be back after a quick break.
I hope you're enjoying this episode. Do you want more warehouse content delivered to your inbox? Sign up for our new email series called Warehouse Wisdom Wednesday to get an educational series of emails on warehouse basics delivered directly to you every Wednesday morning. Find the sign up link in the show notes. Interesting. Yeah. I think it's interesting because, there's certainly, I think there was a period in time where, like that was like a huge deal. Like, oh, you got to get your inventory closer to your customer and be in multiple locations to be able to do that. And then, I think a lot of those models didn't quite pan out in a sense because, to your point, right, if you're at a certain scale, right, like, yeah, like you can do that, but then there's a lot of complexity to manage that and make that happen from a brand perspective. And
Absolutely.
yeah, and I think it's an interesting point there. So I appreciate that insight. And so you mentioned in there too, one of the automations like in your system, you said it. I think the example you said was it was going to be in New York in 5 days, right? You said it to have whatever option is to do that. So talk to us a little bit about kind of what your setup is like from a systems perspective, and how does that kind of give you a differentiation in the market, and how does that give even maybe competitive advantage to the brands you work with?
For sure. So full transparency, we don't have a proprietary WMS. We're on ShipHero currently.
Okay.
It allows us to provide all the services needed to provide the quality that I was talking about, while also keeping the clients comfortable knowing that they have full access and visibility to everything that's going on. So within ShipHero, we have that rate shopping option or rate shopping tool that allows us to make sure that we're always sending things out the best way possible. But it also provides the client with the access to edit an order if needed, to add new products, to things like that, so that there's not kind of like a broken telephone or any delay in communication if, say, an order comes in and then there's a change of address needed. Instead of them having to email us, wait for our team members to see that email, go in and change the order, at which point it might be too late, they have access to go in and make the changes themselves, which is awesome. And then they also have visibility to everything so that they always know how much inventory we have, where exactly in our warehouse it's located, how orders are doing, what's in the queue, what's been already shipped out. So ShipHero has been pretty good for us to be able to provide that service that we have. When we first started, we were on ShipStation, and we kind of outgrew that a little bit. We saw a little bit of limitations with inventory management in there, and I have heard that they've gotten better. But ShipHero has been pretty good for us there, and so they provide those tools that we need to provide the service.
Interesting, and shout out to ShipHero too as well.
Yeah.
And I think that it's interesting perspective there, because I think a lot of differentiation comes from like the systems that you're utilizing, whether it's proprietary or a system that's already out there in the market. So you're in somewhat of a unique position, right? Because you're a brand and a fulfillment partner as well, right? In the same regard. So talk to us a little bit about, from like a 3PL perspective, how important is it to have a system that not only helps you function better as a fulfillment operation, but then also gives good visibility, accessibility to your clients as well. I mean, how much does that matter in developing that client relationship and making sure that you can have a long-term relationship with them?
I think it's absolutely vital. So part of the reason why we're not using a proprietary system is because most of the systems that are available already, they all have the options to provide what's needed. We could probably develop something that could work out the kinks that we have with ShipHero. Nothing is ever perfect, and so there are things that we wish were better, and we could develop it. But the reality is, the differentiation is something that you can control. It's beyond the system. Most systems are going to offer similar things, and so whether we give them access and visibility to all information or kind of keep it close to the chest is really up to us. And we've decided that that's something that we really want to do, both for our benefit and theirs, because we always tell our clients, we're always happy to talk and let's go to lunch and let's become friends. But
Mm.
the reality is, if we're doing our job correctly, there won't be much need for us to be in constant communication, because you'll have access to view what's going on. And if there's ever anything needed within the system, you can do it yourself, and they have the tools to do it. Obviously, we're not saying like hire us and you do the job for us.
Mm.
It's just whenever there's something needed to be changed for specific things, they can do it. So there's no need to have that back and forth, because if we're doing our job correctly here, those things won't come up very often. And so the differentiation, unfortunately, as simple and as ridiculous as it sounds, is in this industry is really just doing what you say you're going to do. So
Mm.
the over promising and under delivering in this industry is crazy. We're going to get all orders out same day, and we're going to save you tons of money on shipping, and we're going to give you all these different options for everything else. It seems to not really be the case a lot of the time. We've talked to a lot of brands that have come over to us that have had bad experiences with other providers, where they were promised certain SOPs, standard procedures, and that were not followed. Things were not being shipped out on time. Inventory was being lost, and it's really just as simple as just treating each brand like it's your own. And that's why that kind of background of ours of still being our own clients, and we needed the service and we provide and we receive the service, it's always kind of stayed with us, and it's a big priority for us to make every brand feel like they are our own as well. So that's the real differentiator. It doesn't come from from the systems or from the technology, even though we are implementing new technologies and everything else just to help with efficiency. But the differentiation is with just treating every brand like they're our only one, and providing the service and making sure we follow through on what we promise we're going to do.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, and I hear that often too. That a lot of there's a kind of a this feeling, right? The brands like hate 3PLs, right? In a sense, right? And some of it, I think,
It's
comes.
kind of a bad word.
Yeah.
3PL, you think it's a horrible experience. And we've come to find, luckily, we've built really great relationships with our clients, and hopefully with them, they don't feel that way.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that a lot of it comes from what you were mentioning, right? They're like over promising and under delivering, and like at the end of the day, like you could create a great relationship, friendship, and things like that. But if those orders are not shipping when they need to ship, and the customer at the end of the day, who is the end consumer, is not getting the experience that they're expecting, then it doesn't matter whether you took me out and bought me a steak or not. Like get my shipments out the door, essentially,
Exactly.
right? So I mean, I think that's such a key thing there to be able to hone in on. So I'm curious, you're 7 years here now, and grown from the 800 square foot warehouses you mentioned that you rented to now 175,000 square feet, two facilities. So tell us a little bit about, as you took your as a brand was like your initial hat, right? And then you put your hat on as like a fulfillment provider. Tell us a little bit about over those 7 years, like what are some of the biggest learnings that you've gotten as a fulfillment provider from that time frame and that growth?
The number one thing I would say is, it seems very easy from the outside, but there's a lot
Yeah.
to it that you don't really know. So if you don't have proper systems in place, proper organization within the warehouse, locating every product, it can get pretty tricky pretty quickly. And so when we first got started, for example, we didn't have barcodes on every product. Like, we didn't require barcodes to scan everything in and out.
Mm.
That can lead to a lot of issues with lost inventory, um, with customer service problems, where if an order arrives with the wrong product, or different quantities or whatever it might be, there's no real kind of paper trail as to what went out. Um, Different systems, as far as we had warehouse management in one, but inventory management in the other, and they didn't necessarily talk to each other very well. We learned little by little that there's very strict kind of rules that we need to live by to make sure that everything is done efficiently and accurately. And once we have those rules in place and followed well, then we can be flexible with everything else. We can provide a different kind of service to each brand based on their specific needs. But the foundation of maintaining a organized and accurate warehouse is vital. And so now we have obviously barcodes on every single product. We scan everything on the way in. We scan it again when it's being picked, and we scan it again when it's being packed. So we have full kind of visibility into exactly where the product is at all times of Like whenever it's in the warehouse, we know exactly where it is, and that wasn't always the case. Uh, and obviously, just with gaining efficiencies with the picking process, the packing process, um, kind of putting different options for automation that will help the humans do their job in the best way possible. One thing that we've seen is kind of the trend towards automation, and we're along for the ride as well. Like we want to put as much automation and efficiency as we can in the warehouse to provide any sort of wins for our team as well as for our clients that we can. But what we found also is that this doesn't diminish the need for really high quality humans to be in the warehouse to work
Mm.
alongside it. So what we've implemented is ways to help make their job more efficient without just replacing that. And so there's been a lot of lessons along the way, and as simple as just keeping inventory better organized, all the way up to getting those efficiencies through technology.
Mm. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's such an interesting thing too, because it does seem easy, right? To, just the average person walking by, oh, the warehouse, they take a box in and they send a box out, right? And that's like, what could possibly go on between there,
Yeah,
right?
it seems simple. So we actually just had this experience just a couple of months back. It's a
Yeah.
pretty cool anecdote where we worked with this company that was pretty new. So they had grown a little bit, and they were shipping out of their garages at the beginning, similar to us.
Mm.
But they took the leap and outsourced it a little bit early, and we took the
Mm.
leap and believed in them, to want to grow alongside them and kind of be a resource on that journey for them. And they worked with us for around 2.5, 3 years, more or less, and they grew pretty significantly, and it was a great story. They decided that they wanted to cut some costs, and they figured like, hey, we were doing it at the beginning with you guys, everything has been so smooth, we're pretty sure we can easily do this ourselves, so let's bring this in house. We're going to save a little bit on the money there, and we'll have no issues.
Mm.
Within maybe 3 months of that, or 4 months of that, they came right back because they were like, wow, you guys really made it look a lot easier than it is. And this is not our business. It's not what we do. And we realized like, hey, not only are we not saving the money because of all the issues that we have with creating it ourselves, but the customers are kind of suffering along with it. So they came right back, and it really is like, it seems so simple. And again, if we're doing our job, it's going to seem simple,
Mm.
but there's a lot more to it.
Yeah, yeah, obviously, and I mean that logistics is hard. It's not easy, right? And there's a lot of moving parts that are going on and things of that nature. So, so we talked a little bit about from like the fulfillment side and kind of what you've learned there and how you've evolved and figured out, how to make it easy for your customers. But as we look at current state today, right, and going into 2025 as well. As we're towards the end of the year here, I mean, what are brands concerned about right now? I mean, what challenges are they facing, and how are you guys kind of helping them to get through that or adjust your business to be able to accommodate some of these maybe newer challenges they're facing, or just in general, what are they looking at?
Obviously, the Amazon model has kind of
Mm-hmm.
made the consumer accustomed to everything being at their doorstep within an hour of them clicking purchase.
Yeah.
And so that makes the customer service experience pretty difficult for brands. That on top of the oversaturation of the market. So e-commerce has just obviously exploded, as we all know. And so it's very difficult to stand out. And so you try to stand out by offering free shipping and cutting your prices and discounts and things like that. But you really can only do so much at that point. And so it's really important to provide the best experience for the customer. And so for us, again, it goes back to those SOPs and making sure that we say that we do what we say we're going to do. So if it needs to be shipped out by a certain day, it needs to be shipped out by that day. We have video cameras and photos of every single item that goes out. So we have a recording of the packing process, and we have pictures that go along with it, so that if ever something is taking too long to get there, or if it arrives a certain way, or if the wrong thing arrives for the customer, those brands are able to provide that documentation of the actual video of what was packed, pictures of it as well, so that they know exactly, hey, we have the peace of mind that they did what they needed to do. And so if there's anything that needs to be corrected, it can easily be rectified. And so not just for them to be able to not fall into the trap of like returns based on phony information or whatever else, but they can let their customers know, hey, we're doing everything we can. We're here with you, and we're going to give you the best service possible because we give them the tools to do that. So not only does everything get out on time, they know exactly where it is, how it's getting there, but the customer is going to have that knowledge as well. And so they're able to provide that incredible experience for the customer and keep them coming back.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. And I think the customer, man, we're demanding, right? So,
Oh, yeah.
that certainly drives like a lot of, how do you capture that customer's attention? And, I think certainly, there's cases where you got to figure out like what does your customer segment actually want, right? And what's important to them. And I think that's good that you're enabling them to do some of that with the tools that you're offering to them, which is adding additional value as your partner to them, as you being a partner to them. And, it makes sense to be able to do that. So what about from like a fulfillment industry perspective? What do you guys see? There's a lot of talk about, consolidation in the fulfillment industry. We've seen, a couple little shakeups from some of the bigger players this year as well, especially like on the 4PL side of things, and the whole debate between 4PL versus 3PL. And what do you see as kind of the roadmap here for the fulfillment industry? I mean, how are you guys looking to continue to grow as well? And what do you see the market looking like over the next couple of years?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And it's an interesting thought where I think a lot of what was happening was with the boom of e-commerce around the time that we got started, and maybe a couple of years after that as well, a ton of 3PLs were popping up because people were like, wow, this industry is booming. People are going to need fulfillment help. And it seems like an easy thing to do, like we've mentioned in the last few minutes. That obviously led to a lot of failed experiences or failed experiments in the fulfillment space. And so we've seen a lot just kind of close and a lot get just gobbled up based on their book of business and whatever else. So that consolidation has definitely been happening, I think, a lot because of the lack of ability to run a profitable and actually healthy business that not only works for the business owners, but for their clients as well. I think for us, we're kind of undecided on how we see the future for ourselves. We feel like we have built a business that provides significant value for our brands, and we would not feel comfortable going into that just consolidation for the sake of doing so if it's going to hurt our brands. And so I think for us, I do see that continuing in the industry in general, and just kind of the big guys continuing to gobble up some of the smaller players and doing it that way. For us, I think that the future holds some additional growth within this market in San Diego and in California, but also then expanding to other parts of the country, because for those bigger players with some significant scale and volume, like we mentioned, that it does make sense for them to have multiple locations. And so we want to be able to provide that for them as well. So for us, I think we're going to continue doing things the way that we're doing it, probably expanding to other parts of the country and just kind of doing it at a higher scale.
Interesting. Yeah. I think it's very interesting to see. And I think you have a great point there too about, there was like this rush a little bit in the market, right? And everybody was like, oh, opportunity, right, to do a business around this. And as we talked about earlier in the conversation, right, it's not necessarily easy to do fulfillment, right? So I think you're seeing like some of that filter out where either they didn't know how to make a sustainable business out of it, or just didn't realize how difficult fulfillment is in a sense. And now either you're seeing some of them get acquired, or either just going out of business and fading essentially, right? So I think it'll be interesting to see over the next couple of years like how that continues to develop, and we'll continue to watch too, to see what you guys are cooking up in the ShipLab for the future there as well. So very interesting to talk to you here today, Alan, and learn a little bit about your business, and also kind of your perspective on the market in general, and some of those learnings over the last 7 years here and through that growth. So really appreciate you coming on and sharing this with us. If people are interested in learning more about ShipLab or getting in touch, what's the best way to do that?
So our website is ShipLabSD, like San Diego, so shiplabsd.com. And they can also just reach out to me directly. It's Alan, ALAN, at shiplabsd.com. And we're always happy to chat with anybody.
All right. Awesome. Really appreciate you coming on today. And we'll put all that information at thenewwarehouse.com as well, so people can easily find it. So, Alan, thank you once again for your time on the show today.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
You've been listening to the New Warehouse Podcast with Kevin Lawton. Subscribe and check us out online at thenewwarehouse.com.
Enjoyed this episode? Make sure you are subscribed to the podcast, and for more content from the New Warehouse, find us on LinkedIn and YouTube. Links to subscribe can be found in the show notes, and for everything The New Warehouse, head to thenewwarehouse.com.